Good evening, and welcome very, very much to this segment of Conversations, where I'm very pleased to welcome to the program a fellow cable programmer, if I may say so, but one who's also gone into dimensions that are quite extraordinary. That'd be Yue-Sai Kan, who has the program Looking East, and a more broadly conceived program, One World, developing in the cable universe. And Yue-Sai, welcome very, very much to Conversations. I wonder if you might share with me, you've had an involvement with cable television programming here in New York City that goes back almost to the beginning of cable programming here, and you grew out of the cable television milieu, didn't you? Sure. Maybe share a little bit of your own historical development, involvement in television, and perhaps a little bit of your own background. You were Chinese born, you have experience both the Eastern and Western cultures and so forth, but maybe you could share a little bit of your own historical background that led you up to cable television involvement.
Yeah, about 13 years ago, a friend of mine who was starting the Chinese cable, or Manhattan cable television, came to me and said that he would like my help, with no money, of course, to help him start the Chinese cable. So, okay, I said, fine. It was really for fun. And then for years I was helping him with newscasting, interviews, both in Cantonese or Mandarin or English. Basically, it's a Chinese program, but you know, because some of your guests had to speak English.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So you know, I had to interview in English too.
And you had the tremendous, so I mean, you had the tremendous advantage of having been born in China, knowing the language, and knowing both of the cultures well. I mean, you had that tremendous advantage.
So in that sense, it's true, I am a product of cable. Without public access cable, I would never have been able to produce Looking East or learn about producing television to start with. You know, we don't come from the milieu of a national network television. I certainly never went through journalism school. I certainly never went through many of the things. I never worked for a network. I never had to start from the bottom or start from anywhere in a network. I guess if I had been in those places first, I would have been so scared about producing television that I would never have started or to begin with.
Yeah, you might not have been able to be as free with developing a creative voice as you were in that milieu that you were in.
Precisely. With that advantage, I also have millions of disadvantages. And given that I had a big gap of information, so I tried to take as many television courses as I could just to supplement. And of course, but most of all that is useless. All of that cannot be compared to the trials and errors you yourself make while doing it.
It probably is true in general that the learning that really sticks and really counts is learning that you do on your own when you're involved in a project that you're really involved in, because you need to learn it and you do learn. And self-discipline is probably the best way of learning any particular skill.
Precisely. I mean, my gosh, you know, being an independent producer who didn't come from the milieu of network and television, I even had to learn what Ikegami 79 means, you know, or Sony Betacam means. A cameraman comes for an interview with me, I've got to talk to him decently, I mean, intelligently about what I wanted and what he can do for me. So in a sense, you know, I really have to learn how to scrape the floors, you know, and how to also interview. I've taken endless speech classes just so that I can speak English like a professional. I don't mind accents, and I don't mean accents either. Accents are okay. I think people don't mind accents. But I would mind very much if I say something and my audience says, oh, I don't know what she just said, therefore missing the second sentence, second thought that I was giving the sentence after that. Then I'm in trouble, because that is being unprofessional. So I can't tell you how many lessons I put together. The first 2 years of Looking East, which was 4 years ago I started Looking East, it's nothing to do with the Chinese cable that I did before. It's an English program geared towards the American audience, although a lot of Asians watch my show because it's the only American national television show on Asia.
And that Looking East that you developed and has gone into syndication in 500 markets around the country here in the United States was developed after maybe 6 years of experience working with the Chinese programming here in New York City. Was that long? So you gained a great deal of experience before you decided to develop the Looking East. More than 6 years.
About 8 years or so. Then Looking East came, and for the first 2 years I really put my own money into it. I put into it's like taking 8 PhD degrees, because I was working 20 hours a day. You know, it was those days. I learned everything on my own. I learned everything on my own. Today, Looking East, even every commercial on Looking East today, and I have some major clients on Looking East. We have United Airlines, we have Singapore Airlines, we have the Singapore Tourist Promotion Board, we have Kikkoman soy sauce. I mean, all these major clients came in because I personally sold each one of them. I'm a little strange in that I really enjoy everything I do.
Yeah, well,
I love it.
Yeah.
I even love the aspect of going to see my clients.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. It's good if you can live life where you're really enjoying the work that you're doing and really involved in it. That's the best way to learn.
Now we can't really do everything anymore because it's getting so big. I'm looking for someone to market my show now.
Yeah, you will look for some help now as the project gets larger and larger, but you still want to keep an overview of it all and get good people you can work with. Sure.
See, since I'm the host, you see, since I'm the host, I really utter every word that comes into the show. You see, if I'm doing an interview, I okay everything anyway. I mean, I ask the questions. So in terms of voiceover, I do everything. I mean, now I have people working for me, but since the voice is mine, although now I don't have the luxury of seeing the product before it even gets on the air, unless it is a something special show, I really maintain an 80% control over them.
Okay, and it was your idea to start this program Looking East in English, gearing to give an understanding to Eastern culture, political, economic expression, and so forth, in a time when there's a greater degree of interest in that, and there's been great interest and it's been able to find 500 markets around the country successfully, and that has been a 4-year experience, a tremendous learning experience, and even now, on the basis of that, in a large degree because of that program, seen by more and more people and respected by more and more people, there's been another quantum leap in your historical development. You've signed a contract or made an arrangement with the Chinese television agency, or
they call CCTV, the only network in China.
Yes, okay.
They're the only one. They're bigger than ABC, CBS, or NBC because they are the only network in China.
They have and how many television sets are there in China now?
It's quite immaterial because one television set can be watched by 30 people.
Yes.
So, in a sense, in the contract itself, which I showed you a copy of, they guarantee 300 million people to watch my show every week, twice a week.
That's a huge audience, isn't it?
Just to give you a perspective of it, Super Bowl, which is seen once a week, I mean once a year, is 100 million people.
And this is going to have an audience. The program that you've made an arrangement with China, the Chinese Television Authority, to produce for the Chinese market, or for the Chinese population, is going to be seen by 300 million. That's staggering.
It is a very conservative figure.
Yeah, that's a conservative figure.
In fact, underneath the proposal, underneath the contract, it says, with the expected big jump in the sales of television sets in China, this number will proportionally increase, which really means that they're telling me that they're being conservative about 300 million viewers. You must understand, viewing television in China is very different from viewing television in America.
Please tell us.
There's only one network,
yes,
first of all. And the television programs start at about 6 o'clock and end about 11 o'clock. And there is absolutely virtually nothing to do in China. There's a saying in China that there are two things you can do after 8 o'clock at night. They go to dinner at 6 o'clock, by the way.
I see.
8 o'clock at night. Well, you can go to bed with a book or without a book.
Oh, I see. That's the entertainment range.
That's entertainment. It's very limited entertainment. It is going to change in time, but television viewing is an extremely important entertainment. It's very important thing for Chinese. Now,
has television, as in China, where most telecommunications authorities around the world, with the exception of the United States, really, and some others, have been government oriented and controlled. So, and much of the television has been seen to move toward educational. Does it try to be educational in its content?
Well, Chinese television is very healthy.
Is it moving commercial? And there's so many changes.
Well, it's commercial because my show is going to have 3 minutes of commercials in it.
Okay, is that unique or unusual? Is it commercially supported programming?
This is the first time they would allow regular advertising on a regular weekly series. They have commercials, yes, here and there, but it's not on a weekly slotted, show.
And what's the programming like? I mean, is it...
one word?
Do you have, the programming in China, television programming, you're a citizen of China, you turn on the television at 8 o'clock at night. I mean, do they have sitcoms? Do they have entertainment?
Well, they have their version of sitcoms. Very healthy is good. Well, you can use the word boring, monotonous.
Dear.
But they don't really know dynasty and dollars. Those things are not for them. They love sports. There are a lot of sports programming. They have a lot of educational programming. They have half an hour of news, of course, every night. They have, on weekends they have children's programming. They have what they call English programming during a weekend hour on Sunday afternoons.
Is that popular?
Very popular. English speaking. Everything about the outside world is of utmost importance to them right now. China is opening up, and opening up at a rate you can't even catch up with. It's so fast. And they are really, like the Minister of Television and Broadcast said to me when I was there, he gave me a banquet the night I arrived, and I turned to him, we haven't started negotiating the contract yet. And I said, well, Minister, what do you think of One World, which is a proposal I was going to give them, which they knew that I was going to give them, or else they wouldn't have invited me. You see, I was a state guest. So he said to me, well, how is China going to open itself up to the world if we don't know anything about the world? So One World is a timely program for them. Their television is quite limited. They have done very little outside of China itself, and they have taken very little footage from outside of China either. See, so they have their version of sitcom. They have their version of maybe a soap opera, but it's really not glitzy, and it's not. It's not like ours. For good or for bad. No, you can't make a value judgment on that, because that's the way they don't believe in the dollars or dynasty because of the fact that they are too risque. And there's nothing risque about Chile.
Yeah, I know. I understand what you're saying. You have that problem with Britain. Some people think BBC One's a little bit, stodgy. Some people feel like that kind of problem. Other places where government's particularly out of hand. Is there a question in terms of, is there a political orientation? I mean, in terms of the programming, is the government, the Communist Party leadership, and so forth, a hand in saying, in terms of the programming, it's not a series of decision makers at ABC or a commercially oriented network? Is the government heavily involved in terms of
CCTV,
programming decisions?
Everything in China is government.
Yes, all right.
Everything in China is government. So when you really want to do something with China, you do it with the government. I don't care which agency you're dealing with. You can be dealing with the Silk Corporation. It's still a government corporation. So when you're talking about CCTV, particularly when you're dealing with CCTV, I'm not selling 1 million garments into China. I am doing a show that will be aired twice a week and will touch the hearts and minds of millions of Chinese. It is like a piece of white paper. The exposure with the world has been very limited. Yeah. It's like writing on a blank piece of white paper. Whatever impression I make onto them is an impression. It's almost like, in many cases, a major first impression. So I really feel the responsibility. It's a tremendous challenge for a television producer.
Yes, it is, and it's also a tremendous challenge for the leadership in China to grant you permission to do this.
You must understand, when they say they open China, and a lot of people say, well, they may not really mean it. Well, the fact that they signed a contract with me is a significant move to show the world that, wow, the world can really say, wow, the Chinese government really mean it. They really mean to open themselves to the world.
And that would tend to agree with your perception of things, that they really do, having the fact that they have done that.
One World is the concept of One World is to bring material into China. One World, true to the world name One World, I took it from Wendell Willkie's book. It is going to bring a variety of subjects from all over the world. It could be politics, lifestyles, business, food, customs, music, interesting sites, interesting personalities. It could be anything and everything outside of China.
They've given you carte blanche. Yeah, in a certain sense.
That's right.
That's incredible.
That is incredible. That is incredible. It's what they call a landmark contract.
Is there an agreement to, suppose you were to produce a program or a concept one? Are there 26 programs, am I correct, in terms of this initial contract?
Well, what happens is we'll produce 13 half-hour original, repeat 13, produce another 13, and repeat 13.
And you'd presented them with an overall concept, or had you provided them with a concept in any detail about what one of those 13 would be? Or have you thought it through, what those 13 might be?
We have thought it very, very
What are the first 13? Have you got them already laid out?
I will not give you all the 13, but I will certainly give you some of the proposals I have given to them, which they get more enthusiastic. I think they got more enthusiastic, as I went on. one of the segments I told them that I would do, it's just like Looking East, it's a magazine format, you see, so it's flexible.
Yeah.
The segments can range from 30 seconds to a whole half-hour program if I should want it to be. So one of the programs I said to them that I would do a program about the farmers in America. Now, 800 million Chinese are farmers. You know, we have an enormous audience who is going to be very interested in how the very rich country of America, which produces a lot of grain for the world, how they live. How about the very poor farmers? How are the middle-class farmers that are being squeezed out by the Reagan administration now? And how about the very, very, very rich farmers who have the money to be mechanized, to be really, you know, there's no way they can die because they have everything that's necessary. Now, I told them that I would do a program about, I would love to do a series of programs called Chinatowns in the World. As we go to Germany later on, I would love to do a program about the Germany's Chinatown, or England's Chinatown, or New York's Chinatown, or San Francisco's Chinatown.
These will all be things, in that case, the Chinatown would all relate back to a sense of empathy they could have with events.
Sure, of course, these are their own people.
It wouldn't be, in a certain sense, in a cultural sense, elucidating an aspect of a culture that doesn't, it can try it back to their own experience. You want to turn it back. It's not just abstractly intellectual or educational or anything like that, so you want to relate it back to them. Right?
Of course, I mean, Looking East is this successful because it relates to their American mentality, although it's cultures that they don't quite understand.
Yes.
But except that they're part of the world that is very important for the Americans. Now, talking about One World, well, I also gave them a program idea. I said I would love to produce a whole half hour of 3 segments of lifestyles in America. And the Chinese have this erroneous idea that all Americans are millionaires.
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 Yeah, right.
All of them. They always really think that the pavement of the roads are paved with gold. There is an old word in China which they call America Jinshan. Jinshan means golden mountain. Well, one of the programs I gave them a total outline was the lifestyles of the Americans. You know, the Chinese have always thought that all Americans are millionaires and that the streets of America are paved with gold. Well, that's hardly true. We certainly have some of the richest people in the world, but not everyone is a millionaire. And as a matter of fact, in many aspects of American life, it's really not even as cozy as the ones in China, as the one in China. So I said that I would do a program that would outline the very rich in America. Perhaps would outline somebody's lifestyle, you know, like a Bob Hope, you know, whom they all know, because Bob Hope was in.
Or Bob.
No, Bob. No, I want rather do
person they would know.
The person they would know, yeah. And then I really would like to take the middle class. The second segment again, it would be a middle class family. How do they educate their children? How do they shop? How do they eat? How do they entertain themselves in the weekend? How do they work? How do they live? How do they do their medical? All these, how do they divide their income? I would take a medium income family, just a little bit above a medium income family, and really concentrate on their lifestyle, therefore giving them a really good idea. Now, the last segment, I really then would like to talk about the very poor. After all, America has 38 million people, what we call below poverty line.
Yes.
Now, below poverty line, granted our poverty line is rather high compared to the other countries. Nonetheless, these people really cannot sustain a minimum living level in America here. Soup lines. You know, there are some people who are really having very hard times. You know, in America, the strange thing is that we really save money for bad times. For instance, we go into a pension fund because we're worried that when we're old, we have no money, right? We go into a medical plan because when we are sick, we're afraid nobody will take care of us. You know, in China, they save for good days because when they are, all their bad days are taken care of by the state. They've already got a house to live in. They pay $1 a month for it. And they have already got a decent burial. The Chinese Constitution grants and promise every Chinese a decent burial. Now, you know what they save money for? They save money for television sets. You know, they go and save up for a beautiful color television, a Sony television set they want to get for their home. I understand somebody just gave me a figure. They just bought 400,000 television sets.
That's a lot. That's an
awful lot of television sets. As I said, a television set is not just like in America. A family can have 3 television sets. In America, in China, one television set can be watched by 30 people, 200 people. You know, I mean, the total idea is different of viewing television. So, you know, the idea of the lifestyles of America is very fascinating to them. You know, for instance, a lot of very outstanding American Chinese, or even Chinese who live all over the world that are very outstanding. And as we travel around the world, I would love to single those out and do profiles on them. Chinese would love to know about them.
Yeah,
don't you think these are wonderful stories?
Yeah, they would love to. Yeah, I should think they would. They'd be very curious, particularly if they have not had a very good view of the world outside, particularly the United States. Has it been clouded over historically by the political differences there were between, let's say, the capitalist West and a communist-oriented political system that they had? Has there been a great deal of what we might say, from our perspective, propaganda views of the United States?
No.
No. I
the
mean,
Chinese really like the Americans.
And vice versa.
I think it's more of the Americans government who really, you know, the Chinese wanted to be recognized by the Americans. The Americans, didn't you hear the story that when President Dallas refused to shake hands with Zhou Enlai? They always remember that. But the Chinese and Americans are very similar. The Americans are very generous, like the Chinese are very generous. They love people, like the Chinese love people. The Chinese are not uptight people, you know. They are like the Americans. In many ways, they're really similar.
What a tremendous challenge you have in order to try and bring these two cultures to know one another better.
I can't think of anything more worthwhile.
We certainly know that culture very, very little. I mean, I was talking to you beforehand when first the opening with Mr. Nixon in 1972. I mean, we've come to know and it is moving very, very quickly now. The liaison between the two cultures is moving very quickly, and the changes in China are moving very quickly to where they're encouraging. Are they encouraged? I mean, television set as a consumer thing. Do they have their capital base or infrastructure in place? Are they beginning to be able to come out with greater consumer items, television sets, brighter clothes, things of that sort? So it's coming out of what was a period of it building up their industrial base?
They're encouraging that a great deal, and you see a lot of products beginning to be selling in China altogether. And the expendable income, the Chinese have never had greater expendable income as a nation as today. And so it's a very exciting change altogether. But you see, in terms of what I do for them, I can't think of anything more worthwhile. I mean, I bring my a world that I was from, meaning Asia, into America by doing Looking East, and now I'm just completing the metaphor. I'm bringing that bridge back to Asia, in the sense that I am bringing my adopted area of reference.
Here,
Asia. I mean, back to Asia. You know, Europe.
A real child of the world. You know, so you're really a child of one world, and you took that name yourself. And you said that the meeting with the Chinese representatives was a state visit on your behalf. They had asked you to come to discuss this.
I knew
and
that
based upon
orally.
the program that you had.
See, I know them very well. I know the CCTV people very well. The network people very well. So when some of them came here one time in October, I verbally talked to them about it, and they were just excited, very, very excited about it. And then I then finally wrote an informal letter over, and I knew it was very well received also. So what I did was, since Christmas was coming up, and it was a time when I could get away, so I called up and I said, listen, if you really are interested, I will come over. So they really bent their back how do you say, themselves backwards, and really invited me over, and a few major banquets were arranged for me by some major ministers. In addition to that, the fourth most powerful man in China, they call the fourth most powerful, his name is Hu Qili, rumored to be the next head of leader of the party. In China, it's a very powerful position. He gave me a banquet in the Great Hall of the People. So I know that my project was very much endorsed by the highest level of the Chinese government, which is, as you know, people that are sensitive to communist or socialist governments' policies. That means a great deal. So I really have the green light and the support in every possible way. You know, and they treat me very, very differently. I mean, my contract was negotiated in one day, and those of you who know
on a
about...
napkin or something.
No, not on a napkin, but... Really, the negotiation was done in one day. That's it. And for people who do business with China, would tell you that it's almost an unbelievable thing.
I understand it could be a little bit difficult.
A little bit. CBS took 2 years to do it. You know?
Right.
And so they really have tremendous faith. They really have tremendous. I'm a Chinese girl. I speak their language.
Right.
You know, I'm in a very different position.
Surely, you're in the catbird seat in a certain sense, you know, because you're in a very advantageous, because you really do understand the culture and so forth. You've had all this experience. They had gone also, I mean, when you're talking in terms of 400 million television viewers and this kind of thing, it's a huge market. They're interested in having programming. They have talked with others, CBS and other programming that they then contracted to have in the normal way, brought in to carry to the Chinese
well,
population.
they have to. No, those programs are different,
in
though.
from outside, that they're selecting the program that's been done is in the can, and they could select from and do.
They have to change it.
Oh, they do have to change it.
Oh, sure. They have to make it into a Chinese program. My program is a Chinese program.
Yeah,
where
right.
It's shot in Mandarin.
Yeah, it is.
It's produced in Mandarin.
Yeah.
It's conceived in the way that we want, you know. But these programs that they chose, like Rose Parade, sure, they will have to completely redo the program. They have to voice over in Mandarin. They have to, you know, they even cut out many things that they can't use, although they have chosen some programs. So it's a different thing altogether.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful that we have some nice CBS programs in China because they really need it.
Yeah,
it's really nice.
And it was just curious to know what kind of programs, given the array of programs that are in the can in the various places around the world that they could select to put on cable. I mean, to put on television in China. What kind of programs they selected? I mean, they didn't.
They selected the Rose Parade.
That's interesting.
They selected a sports program. They selected Walter Cronkite's science series.
Oh, truly? Yeah. Well,
now they a lot of that they cannot use because it's a lot of them are really talking heads.
Yeah.
So they can't really adapt every sentence that is spoken. This is what they told me anyway.
Yes.
I have not seen it. But when I was in Peking last time, I saw I believe it was a television film. It's called House Without Christmas Tree by Jason Robart.
Yeah.
It was about two children, you know, and a family and all that. It was very educational, you know.
Yes, right, yeah.
And they, of course, they adapted the whole thing, and they had to do all the voice, you know, the children, you know, all done in Chinese. But good programming, nice programming. Very happy for them.
Yeah,
that,
right.
They have the opportunity.
And so you'll be able to work with them? Are you going to work with pieces? Are you going to do any pieces in China at all? Or will it be all programming from outside brought
Well, it's one word. You see, they don't need me to do things about themselves. You see, I go to China anyway, but I'm going to China to do programs for Looking East.
Yes, right.
You know, that is necessary. But they don't. What I would do is I only do things outside. I do Asia, Europe, or all over the world, and America.
Yeah, right. Okay, so you're going to be doing. So you'll be continuing the Looking East program at the same time you're doing One World.
What is interesting is that 1/3 of the program will probably be on Asia. 1/3 of the program will probably be America. I mean, by virtue of the fact that I am an American Chinese,
you are now, yeah, right. Okay.
I give a different significance to that show. You know, I'm really a different significance, you know, versus the fact that I may be a French Chinese. It would be very different. That program would be very different. And then the other 1/3 of the programming will most likely be the rest of the world.
Yeah, I see. Okay, fine. Well, you got that. But I mean, it's interesting. So you're going to maintain your career and you even have programming still going on Access? Yeah.
I have Access, I have Channel J, I have Channel 3, which is Channel 31. I'm 5 times a week here.
Well, it's a real American success story in the sense that you've gone and done that, and now you're developing this program, One World, that's going to make you one of the most viewed television personalities in the world.
I will be the most viewed television
The most viewed television personality in the world, who is going to, in a systematic way, have a program that's going to be viewed by 300 million in the Chinese. Now, what can you, and you've got the Looking East here. Is Looking East expanding here in the United States? Is there more?
Looking East right now goes to a potential audience of about 40 million.
Goes to a potential audience of 40 million. That's a pretty good audience share here then as well. Do you think that could expand here? Television, the Looking East format. You had a seminal developmental sense of creative involvement with, could also find now greater expression within the television circles of the Western world, as it were, in a certain sense?
Yeah. I think Looking East is bound to create, bound to expand. Because I think with the visibility of One World, you know, Looking East is already one of the most visible programs in certainly in cable area.
Yeah.
And it is a wonderful program. It's nothing like it.
Yeah, there's
nothing like it. You've seen it.
Yeah, I know. It's very, very good indeed. I mean, it's very, the content of it is very good, and it's very appropriate to a world that is more and more coming to be able to meet at the twain, even though Kipling said it would never happen. That there's a coming together of these things at a particularly important time. I congratulate you on your position. You must be feeling happy. You haven't run out of material yet that you want to do programming about or anything like that. Never. There's plenty to be doing. I don't know. You have the first program on the moon or something like that. You go to one world. Well, in any event, it's a tremendously exciting story.
We'll do two worlds at that time. We'll go to the moon.
Do two worlds, right? You have to do somebody's going to have to do meaningful programming from space. But you certainly have taken care of this world context in a very, very nice way. And certainly, I can do nothing but congratulate you very much on this entrepreneurial effort on your part to develop a greater degree of understanding among the peoples of the world. It's like you say, a tremendous challenge, and certainly one that seems to me, if I may say so, to be in eminent good hands, and that being in the hands of Yue-Sai Kan, who is the producer of One World, upcoming in the Chinese market, and Looking East, a program that's destined to become ever more seen in the Western world television milieu as well, and helping to bring together one world of understanding. May I just really congratulate you very much on all of that work. And I certainly want to thank you for participating here on the Conversation Series. It's been a great pleasure talking with you.
Delighted.
Your pleasure to have had the perceptions of Yue-Sai Kan, then the director or producer and the creative force behind this incredibly important television programming development. Please stay tuned. There'll be more coming up in the same general topic area momentarily. That's it for this particular segment. We're coming right back. And Yue-Sai, once again, thank you very, very much indeed for everything. Welcome very, very much to this segment of Conversations. We're pleased to welcome to the program Mr. Charles E. Walsh. And Mr. Walsh is the Vice President, Worldwide Advertising and Sales for the CBS Broadcast International. And Mr. Walsh, welcome very, very much to Conversation.
Thank you.
I wonder if you might share for myself, certainly, and for the general cable television audience, the increasing internationalization of the television marketing or television programming world. We're becoming increasingly international in terms of scope, even though we've traditionally had the broadcast networks have traditionally had a domestic purview, but it's becoming increasingly international, and the international dimension of programming is becoming increasingly important, isn't it?
That's true. As a matter of fact, one of the relatively new buzzwords in the trade is global marketing or global networking. That latter may be somewhat farther down the road, but global marketing certainly is a buzzword of the moment, and does indeed explain the globalization of the whole approach to selling a product worldwide, as distinguished, incidentally, from international or multinational. Globalization being the word to describe the marketing of a product worldwide in different countries and different cultures, based on the similarities of that product, as opposed to tailoring the approach country by country and tailoring the specific marketing theses for that individual country.
Yeah, well, I wonder if that would come around to affecting in any kind of way programming decision makings about topic areas.
Well, I think
it
could be. Yeah, it could be as we become more one world than we have up to this point. Certainly, the least common denominator of programming is increasing.
There's a demand on a worldwide basis for television programming in general and for American produced product in particular, isn't there?
Yes, there's a vast demand for it. Particularly when you take into account the ever-growing cable network market. Every cable system that comes into being requires programming, and there have been many calculations to indicate that the demand is far in excess of the supply worldwide.
Are you speaking cable on the world scale?
I'm talking about program, yes.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about cable on a cross-border basis. No, I'm talking about cable systems which are essentially local in character, but burgeoning to a greater extent in many countries than they are here.
Each of the nations, of course, will have television production capability of their own, and there's local television being produced in various countries and so forth.
Yes, there is, in varying degrees.
But despite this, there still is a demand for international quality programming in a certain sense, right?
And American in particular, because it has led the industry in the world for so long.
And you've been involved in that for some time now, all around the world, in a sense.
Yes, indeed. More particularly, I have been involved with the introduction of advertising support for the programming. There are two elements to our business, really, or at least two. The syndication or the selling of American programming in various markets of the world as programming, pure and simple, for a license fee. You in Thailand, as a broadcaster, may utilize program A from our catalog for a specific period of time. That's an outright licensing fee for a specific term under which you are permitted to use that program on your air, if you will, as your own.
Is it similar to an aftermarket or a syndication kind of capability
it's
here within the
worldwide
domestic way?
syndication.
Are there differences in terms of doing business around in different nations as opposed to, let's say, the traditional domestic?
Yeah, but not in essence. No, it's just saying you pay a license fee and you use it for a certain period of time.
So the terms of business are more or less understood by the peoples around the world. And I wonder, does it make a difference? Is there not increasingly advertising supported or commercial television activity, certainly in Europe, Italy, and so forth? There's increasing commercial television venues being allowed where traditionally it's only been a government supported kind of process?
Yes, it has been a function in many countries of the postal and telegraph systems, which have been the fathers, if you will, of broadcast in those countries. A lot of things are changing. Technology, as so often is the case, is leading the other elements of the equation. Technology exists now, for example, to send a broadcast signal up here, for example, and bounce it off 4 or 5 birds, satellites, if you will, and have that program come down in 4, 5, 6 languages, cover the world. Technically feasible. Economically not so yet, and even beyond that, the problems of culture and political regulation are what are holding back the complete globalization.
So it's still a matter of what might have been called bicycling of tape to a broadcast entity within a local market and that kind of thing. It's still the rule. I mean,
yes, but that's falling by the wayside as more and more satellites get up and more countries make use of it.
Starting to get crowded out there with satellites.
Yeah,
I mean, so
I wouldn't worry about that.
But they had developed, hadn't they? Intelsat and so forth, developed a pretty advanced system even before we began to develop a domestic. There had been there's a pretty sophisticated system, but we do have political, cultural problems that have to be dealt with, I guess, in terms of that question.
I think there's another tenet to be observed in this, and that is that in many countries of the world there are license fees that are charged by the government for use of a television set. It varies a little bit. You may have to pay the license fee for the first one in the household and not for the subsequent sets, but I guess in more cases than not, each set is charged for by month. They probably have reached the summit of possible charge there in most cases. So it seems to me, at least, that the fellow that's going to come along and pay the bill is the advertiser. And as soon as we can get by, and it will happen sooner than we think, get by the obstacle of the regulation and the culture and some of the cross-border controversies that have arisen, the advertiser will be the one to supply the engine that will pull this train, because there doesn't really seem to be any other source of revenue. So we firmly believe that advertiser-supported programming is a thing of the future. Worldwide.
Worldwide, particularly so. We've had a pattern of that here in the domestic market here, but it's going to become more and more characteristic of the
Yes, the pattern has been that here very substantially.
Yes, right.
Not so in many other places of the world, and that's what the trend is as we see it.
Yeah, it seems to be emerging that way, which will call for ever more possibilities for product. They'll be looking for product to fill those channel capacities, which there's a shortage of now, in a sense, isn't
it?
Yes.
I mean,
so it's a seller's market, in a sense? Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think it's a seller's market. Of course, there are mitigating circumstances that affect price. And that's not a bad lead into the situation that we have found ourselves involved in China.
Yes, please.
The Chinese, there is a Chinese network, number one, and there are something upwards of 50 million television sets in China. Population is slightly over 1 billion.
Yes, it's staggering.
And you do a little arithmetic, and that's a lot of people per set. Reminds me of the early days here when the local tavern had the television set, and 75 or 100 people crowded around it of an evening to watch the top sport event of the week.
Or Kukla Fran and Ollie?
Or Kukla Fran and Ollie, exactly.
Yes.
So there are multiple viewers per set in China, and indeed we have seen and read stories about people bicycling, which is still the most frequent use of mode of transportation in China, for 50 miles to come to the local town that has a set.
Yes.
And it's a community event. And there's not a heck of a lot else to do in the rural areas of China.
Yeah, that's what I understand.
So I guess I was getting to the point that the Chinese network has a big job to do. They do not have what you would call American class productivity capability, so they need programming. Mm-hmm. They don't have or don't choose to spend hard currency for that programming, at least not in any major way. Mm-hmm. This indeed led to the arrangement that we effected with the Chinese, which is the old barter principle, if you will. They didn't have money. We're not interested in rice. Mm-hmm. We're in the television business. So we felt here that we might make very good use of a capability that we feel is prime amongst the many that we have, and that is bringing the advertiser in tune with the audience that he hopes to deliver a message to. So we negotiated with the Chinese over a considerable period of time, which is axiomatic in China. The net of that was that we give the Chinese approximately 75 hours of programming per year in this current arrangement. And incidentally, we were on the air. We went on the air as of December 4th.
Well, congratulations. It's a major cultural event. I mean, in the history of the cultural unfolding of the world, it really is. A meeting in East and West and so forth. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In return for this programming, they gave us permission to sell advertising time therein to whomever, usually multinationals, who are interested in reaching that billion-person market.
Yeah,
not necessarily the consumer product advertiser, because obviously there are limitations on the consumer market in China, although miracles are in being right there, right now.
Tremendous changes going on, culturally, politically, economically. China's opening out onto the world and so forth. Yeah.
They don't themselves like the use of the word capitalism, but many of the facets of capitalism are in vogue there now and working very successfully for the Chinese. Such a simple thing as incentive pay.
Yes.
You work a little harder, you do a little better job, and you make a few more bucks in your paycheck.
Yes.
They just discovered that, or we discovered it, because nobody really discovered anything before the Chinese did. The culture that, what's the year they're in? Just the other night, they're in year 4,685, the year of the ox.
Pretty long roots they go back. It's a pretty old cultural tradition. And we'd been in a state of, the situation between the West and China had been in such a condition before Mr. Nixon's opening and so forth. Yeah. And there's been these tremendous changes that have occurred, leaps forward, cultural problems. Some people feel that there was a piece in the paper today, they felt they'd wasted 20 years of economic development. But they have been building, in a certain sense, an infrastructure and beginning to build. They're beginning to get a little more color and so forth there. And television would be part of that. I was just wondering, you say there's 50 million television sets in China now. Are those Japanese produced? Do they do it themselves? Are they developing their own internal market? Do you happen to know? I wonder.
Yes, I know. In their essence, yes. Most of them are Japanese, or they have been assembled in China by joint ventures between Japanese manufacturers and Chinese manufacturers. And also the Chinese are indeed manufacturing sets of their own.
Okay, right. They got their own industry.
It's gone three ways.
And how long has the television programming been going on in China, before, let's say...
Before we were involved?
Yeah, I mean, how long have they been doing that? Do you happen to know?
I would say it's probably... It seems to me that the first big event and the touchstone from which they really count their existence was the funeral of Mao Zedong, which was, how many years, 8 or 10 years ago, when that was televised. People, I'm told, went out and bought borrowed or stole every television set in sight, and there weren't many then. But from that event forward, television became something that was real in the Chinese curriculum.
Yeah, and the Chinese culture and the economy, of course, is a communist system, so the government has a hand in everything in a very real sense.
Fully control.
And what kind of programming had they had, I wonder? I mean, on a regular basis, what kind of programming had they been used to seeing?
Well, pretty parochial.
Yeah,
and somewhat key to the rural, essentially a rural economy. How to fertilize a rice paddy, that kind of utilitarian programming.
Was it good programming?
I don't denigrate that at all.
No,
but it was what was needed in that particular culture at that particular time. However, as the
that was
taste...
that was homegrown television. I mean, they were doing that themselves.
Right.
And they still have a capacity for doing that, but they want to
do. And that's
liven it
increasing.
up.
That capacity is increasing. Indeed, they are involved, the Chinese network is involved with joint productions with the television broadcasters of other countries. And they have done a lot of very good things.
Oh, good. Yeah, were they involved in Marco Polo?
They are, well, it was done there on one of these joint venture operations with RAI, the Italian governmental.
So there's creativity on their part in terms of creating product and so forth, but they wanted, in a certain sense, to begin to bring programming produced outside, and it was beginning to open up, as it were, the world to the Chinese perception through the television that they've been, in a sense, isolated. The people has. It must be a pretty exciting mix of cultures there that's going on.
Very exciting and very dynamic. It's difficult to assess just where this is all leading. I think in their selfish objectives, and Deng Xiaoping, who was their premier leader and a gentleman of obviously broad vision, where he is taking them is very interesting to conjecture. I see some of our programming, which incidentally was chosen with great care by them, obviously to avoid any political or politically...
I was wondering about that.
We may come back to that, what they chose and how they chose it. I'd like to come back to that because it's interesting. But what might happen as a result of the Chinese millions seeing even some of the relatively quiet, unprovocative, evergreen kind of programming that we are supplying them with, I just wonder what it's all going to lead to.
Well, it's going to have a profound cultural effect. I mean, it's an incredible educational experience in any terms that you think of. I was just wondering, was the total programming that CBS had done been made available to those decision makers who would decide what programming they wanted to put on the Chinese system? Or did you, on your parts, limit certain things and not make them available?
No, we made our complete catalog available to them.
And from that, they were able to select whatever it is they wanted to select?
Well, they did some preliminary work from the catalog, but following that, and after some months of study there by their own people, they sent a team here, a team of 5, who were here for more than 3 weeks in these offices and in their own hotel rooms with television monitors so that they could work over the weekends and at nights. They were here for over 3 weeks, 5 of them, viewing programming, hundreds and hundreds of hours on our inventory, in order to select of the order of 75.
I see,
And
be curious, what did they select?
Well, that's interesting.
Well, is there a pattern to it, I wonder?
There is a pattern, yes. There's a pattern of be safe.
Yeah.
That's
all
the
right.
course. That's
right.
And obviously, that's understandable. And there was almost always a unanimity of decision amongst the 5. If any one person of the 5 felt that something was out of tune or might be out of tune, why that particular decision was negative and that program was not selected.
And these 5 were all of the broadcast authority?
Oh, absolutely. These represented different departments of the broadcasting network, sports, news, etc. And they had to come almost 100% to unanimity before choices were made, which makes it a little difficult. What did they select? Well, they selected some of the things that you might guess. Things like music programs, things like sports, NBA basketball, for example. They're very keen on basketball in China, and they're quite good at it, particularly their women's team. So that was an easy selection. There's no politics in basketball.
Sports would be easier, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Until you get to public affairs and things, it might be a little difficult.
That becomes a little difficult. They selected a relatively old series of ours that you probably remember with Walter Cronkite called Universe.
Oh, wonderful.
Which is scientific, technological, non-contentious in any way that I could see.
And he would be recognized there.
Yes.
Presume,
oh, yes.
Right? I mean, among the people.
Yeah,
he would know. Yeah, right. Okay.
So they selected quite a few episodes of that. They had having a fling with U.S. football, which is kind of interesting because in particular, there's a game between, well-remembered game between Miami and Boston College, the famous Doug Flutie last-second pass. They, not because of that pass, but they decided to take a whack at American football. with that choice went the obligation of trying to explain in advance to the audience of why these 22 guys are out there beating each other up. And indeed, we had to supply them with a lot of material that I think was put together originally to explain to wives, Sunday afternoon widows, I should say, Sunday afternoon widows, how they should watch football if they want to join their husband.
Yeah, I was thinking we might be able to get a tape that would be applicable to ourselves to understand it. Right, yeah, but it's interesting.
And they picked some movies. They liked Ben Franklin. We have an old mini-series on Ben Franklin. Ben is obviously an inventor, but also a revolutionary. They liked that. They liked anything. They took Dr. Seuss, a series on Dr. Seuss.
Okay, good choice. Yeah.
They anything that appeals to children, they like, and anything that revolves around family life, they appreciate and want.
I see. So they were interested in these children's programming and so forth. I'm wondering, these were in sports. That would be something that would be, in a certain sense, as you say, safe. Did they select anything of a political consequence? Was there any harvest of shame or any of the kind of things that would have shown this country in a negative light, or any of that they steered away from that?
Steered away from that completely.
Right. Even though if they had wanted it, they could have. I mean, from your perspective,
sure.
You didn't care.
What intrigues me somewhat is that inadvertently, some things may have slipped through that will find social implications. I don't mean politics, really, but imagine an American family, typical day's life, automobiles, people eating at a dinner table, stopping into the local store, shelves in the supermarket, that kind of thing. There may be, at some point in time, a social reaction to that. I hope it's positive.
Just a reaction to the realities that do exist here as we go about it, in a certain sense, because they'll have a view of it. There's a great curiosity on their part about the outside world.
Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah.
And indeed, curiosity about other countries other than the United States. They're interested in almost anything that's of a travelogue nature.
Yeah, okay, right.
And other lands, other peoples.
So it's serving a real educational purpose in a very real sense, consciousness raising in that sense. And it's amazing that there's that number of people. When you think of the number of people collected around the television set, it would be... you can get audiences in the millions, where, I don't know, Super Bowl gets 100 million, I guess, but you could get audiences in the millions in terms of people, right? I mean, it's a cultural...
The share, if you are familiar with television term, the share is always 100.
Right. And I mean, it's a coming together of the East and West at a time of volatile change in terms of these relationships. So it's an exciting adventure, I should think, on your part to be involved in that. And I should think it would be exciting on the people who would participate. Let's say some of the people who help in giving mostly corporate messages or messages in terms of the advertising?
Yes.
Who are the people that are interested in terms of backing them up in an advertising mode? And was there any problem with them going with an advertising mode in terms of, very often that's something that government-oriented systems aren't cottoning?
Small experience with commercialization, if you will, local people. Nothing on any regular basis or exaggerated basis. But what we proposed to them was completely new to them, but they accepted it, which was simply that we would provide sponsorships from multinational corporations who were interested in delivering a message to China. I think they broke down, at least in my mind, into two categories. Companies who saw 1 billion people as a market sometime.
Oh, sure.
They don't know when. They don't know when. Some more immediate than others. And then companies in the heavy industry, if you would, or even services, where they saw a more immediate market as China is bringing itself up to the world norm in terms of technical capacity.
Yeah.
I guess I could perhaps answer that question best by telling you who some of our sponsors are at this point in time. Boeing Aircraft, Boeing Company is very much interested in that market. IBM is another. Weyerhaeuser, which is a lumber products company. Procter & Gamble, probably the world's largest advertiser.
I was going to say just a few of the smaller ones.
And Kodak, which is has a more current interest than most, because that product has been in China. The yellow box has been in China for quite a while.
Yeah, they have a sense of social responsibility on their part in terms of almost reaching out toward a one world concept that many people believe in, and see that this is a way to help foster that. So it's an exciting development. It
really is.
It is, I should think. And you're the one, you negotiated that more or less with them.
Well, obviously, any deal of this nature, there are a lot of people involved. I happened to be there at the time that this culminated and indeed signed the contract, but a lot of people had part in it. So It's
And-
not a one-man job by any means.
And it's a long-term process, so this will be continuing on.
Yes, yes, it will.
Can you think we can see our television screens being graced with television programming produced in China at any near
The
date?
Chinese would love that.
Yeah,
and
some
indeed,
co-venture or something?
that subject has been on the table, and it could be one of these days.
Yeah, it could be.
Their quality in, I wouldn't say across the whole gamut of their production, but their quality can be very, very good.
Well, we are becoming one world in a very real sense, and in a sense the
are.
technology is leading us in that direction, and that's the television programming is, and it's an incredibly interesting story, and it's one that's of great importance as far as we go along. It would seem to me you're in a very real, interesting position, as it were, helping to work this out, an ambassador of good information programming and so forth. I congratulate you on having successfully completed that, and in advance, perhaps, on all the work in that direction as you move on into the future.
Well,
You've
thank
had
you.
such a hand in
Thank you,
built.
Mr. Chen. I appreciate that.
Not at all. It's been my pleasure speaking with you, and
My
I'm sorry, we've only just been able to scratch the surface of all the implications of it. But I would remind you in the cable television audience, it's been your pleasure to have the perceptions of Charles E. Walsh, who's the Vice President Worldwide Advertising and Sales with CBS Broadcast International. Happy to be able to bring you those perceptions, and we would invite you to tune again next week. I'm sorry, that's it for this particular section. We'll be back again next week, so we'll see you then. And once again, Mr. Walsh, thank you very, very much indeed for
My
everything.
pleasure. Thank you.